everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today, we're going to be looking at Promethean number 5. This is probably one of the rarest things I own, and it's pretty fucking amazing. It's, Promethean, I think, started in the late 60s, early 70s. It was one of those prozines. Prozines were basically fanzines that were really well-produced, kind of slick. They'd have, like, big names, like they'd get a cover by Frazetta, or comics from Mike Kaluta or Bernie Wrightson. They definitely were not your average mimeograph fanzine. And Promethean was one of them. But it always leaned heavily towards underground stuff. So I consider this, and the Comics Joint underground site considers this an underground. And I think it is. And it's just so much interesting stuff in here. This is just a really done, magazine, basically. I guess prozine. It's, I think this was the last issue. This is from 1974-ish. And it's just amazing what these guys did with probably they weren't getting paid. They were just fanzine editors, you know. Let's start off here with, this is amazing. Especially considering the time. Robert Williams was not a painter, at the time. He was an underground cartoonist. And he did, hot rod art and stuff like that. So this is like one of his earliest full-on paintings. This thing, like his other paintings, is gigantic. I think it's like 40 inches by 50 inches. It's big. And this is just incredible. I've never seen this anywhere else. Actually, I probably have, but I forgot. But this is amazing. Just look at this. It's like this amazing sci-fi paperback cover. This weird world that's circular. And it's just beautiful. Definitely different than the paintings he became famous for, his narrative paintings with all the story. This is just a cool image. But man, it's like the old masters, It's just like great Renaissance art. It's so well done. On top of that, we get this, he could just, I didn't even know if they asked him to do this. He made this beautiful logo. It's so obviously Robert Williams with the shiny chrome effects. I imagine if these guys continued, they'd use this logo. I hope so. Because that's a total bonus right there. Not only getting this amazing painting by Robert Williams, and then getting this great logo. So right there, that's worth the price of admission. I'm sure the price of admission now is very expensive. I think I got this from Bud Plant when I was a teenager. I think it was roughly cover price at the time. It wasn't a rare collector's item. That's how old I am. It was probably like, $5 or something. So we have this beautiful introduction page, and it's not credited. Actually, is it credited? Sorry about that. Let me check real quick. It's not credited, but this looks very R. Crumb. Then again, it could be someone aping him. So I don't know if they got him to do the lettering. The first issue of Promethean in like late 60s, it actually had a contribution from R. Crumb. So they had a long history with him. But this is Al Dvorin. He's one of the co-editors. And I've seen his name around in fanzines and undergrounds, but not much. And pretty skillful. This is the Promethean logo, the official logo, which I cannot make heads or tails of how this is to be read as Promethean. It's almost like graffiti art, where, okay, I'll take your word for it. That says Promethean. Whatever it is, it looks fucking wicked. It's pretty cool, but I don't see any letters in there at all, let alone Promethean. Oh, I forgot to show this. These end papers are also Al Dvorin. For the fold-out inside cover, and then the inside back cover. Even though it's just basically a simple design, but it's credited to Al Dvorin. He was the editor, so he could give himself all the credit he wanted. So the editors were Jim Vadeboncoeur Jr., who went on to do many fan publications. In fact, I'm pretty sure he did those Marvel indexes in the late 70s that were like, he's a Canadian guy, and they were like beautifully produced prozines, beautiful cardstock covers. He'd get really good artists to draw them, and they were just index Marvel comics, issue by issue. This is way before, Marvel did that themselves. And I could be wrong about that, but I think that's the guy. Now I'm doubting myself. He might be a totally different guy, but I know this guy did a bunch of fanzines. Al Dvorin is the other editor, and Bud Plant, the great distributor. I probably bought this from Bud Plant. And Bud Plant was not only just a distributor / retailer, he also was a patron. And he would kind of give seed money to a lot of underground, semi-underground, ground level comics. Even when he didn't do that, if like when ElfQuest came out, he'd buy half their run. So they were guaranteed that many sales. Bud Plant would be like, whatever you publish 20,000 issues, I'm taking 10,000. It wasn't consignment. He just bought them and then sold them over the years. So he was really like a patron of interesting comics. So this beautiful contents page is George Barr, who I'm pretty sure went on to be a pretty big science fiction paperback illustrator. Probably some hardcovers too. Oh, so apparently I was right. Oh, never mind. I wasn't right. This is another credit. So the bulk of this issue, which was very odd for Promethean, is a huge interview with R. Crumb. Now think about it. 1974 is before the Comics Journal even existed. This is an amazing interview conducted by Al Dvorin with R. Crumb at the height of his hippy-dippy stardom. And he's still already a little bitter, but not really as bitter as he got. And it is a great interview. It's just a freewheeling discussion and just getting to see R. Crumb, all of his thoughts back in 74. There's not many interviews with R. Crumb back then. The Comics Journal came out a few years later. They'd have in-depth interviews with creators. It was pretty rare to see anything like this. Of course, a Graphic Story Monthly, the great fanzine from the late 60s, they had really in-depth interviews as well. But as far as I know, they pretty much interviewed mainstream comic creators like Basil Wolverton or, other people. But just an underground comics creator getting this much serious interview coverage, this was pretty remarkable at the time. So remember, it's a prozine. It's not quite a magazine, so it's got this typewritten font. But really good spell checking. It's not amateurish at all. Every page has one of these panels from that R. Crumb story, the many faces of R. Crumb. It's probably called something else, but basically that's the gist of it. Crumb, the long-suffering artist saint. Here's a picture with him and his girlfriend at the time. More of these little illustrations. These are great. I know I've read this comic before, but I just can't remember where. So I know you're probably thinking, you review comics on your channel, Hercules. You don't review fanzines and stuff. Even though eventually I probably will get around to it because I have a lot of great fanzines. But this is more of, even though I said the bulk of it's the R. Crumb interview, it's almost 50-50. There's a lot of comics in here. And within the interview, look at this. Especially at the time, this was super rare. This was the comic that R. Crumb did when he worked at the greeting card company. This was for their inter-office newspaper. So this is super rare Crumb that pretty much only a couple hundred people saw who worked at Hallmark or whatever the greeting card company was called. They're not his best work by far. Roberta Smith Office Girl. It's kind of, cutesy humor. He couldn't go crazy. But even though some of them were a little, I guess, a little dark. And his bosses would give him shit about it. Yeah, just total office humor. The thing that would belong in a newspaper, you know, an inter-office newspaper, or newsletter, I should say. And here's his cover for Yarostrox number 3. And here's, this is kind of neat. They found the newspaper that was, this was an underground newspaper. And this is the news when Snatch came out, which Crumb was very instrumental in creating. I think he might have edited it. And these were just hardcore porn comics. This was like the underground really pushing the boundaries. And it got him in trouble. So that's kind of historically important. This, I believe, this might be some of the stuff he did for Help magazine when he was working for Harvey Kurtzman. The heap years of the auto. Man, I just love this bulbous R. Crumb. Obviously grew up reading funny animal comics. Look at these crazy cars. They're like balloons with wheels. I didn't even know if he's making some of these up. I'm not a gearhead. I don't know. But it's pretty fucking fun to look at. So this is like a super rare thing, especially back in 74. We're a little spoiled now. Things are getting reprinted left and right. But you had never seen that. Unless you happen to have that issue of Help. So now we have the big comic section. Promethean Comics. So this is almost like a little magazine, underground comic within the magazine. And obviously very EC inspired. I love the way they do this, like the EC comics. I believe this is George Metzger. I should have done more research for this episode, guys. Sorry. We have an inside quote-unquote front cover by Frank Brunner. He was like I think he was just starting to work at Marvel at the time. He was in fanzines, though, in the early 70s. Very competent, pretty nice fantasy art. And then we have, I believe this is chapter 3 of George Metzger's Panoply Mind. Pretty nice splash page there. And they give you a synopsis. And, you know, I found this very confusing. This is the 3rd chapter of some serial. And it continues, it would have continued next issue. I don't know if he ever finished this. This is some nice Metzger art, though. Some of the better Metzger art I've seen. Some really trippy stuff. So this is like man and woman. They hook up with this like shaman guy, and he basically teaches them how to release their astral selves. I think he gives them peyote, and they're floating through this futuristic, kind of post-apocalyptic city. Yeah, it definitely seems interesting. I wonder if this was ever completed and collected. I don't know. I don't think I've ever heard of Panoply Mind as an underground, but maybe it's in one of George Metzger's collections or something. Pretty nice Metzger. So unfortunate to be continued. I'm probably never going to get Promethean 1 through 4, so it'll remain a mystery. And speaking of bulbous, this is so goofy. This car dealership owner. It's like, see you in the morning, boys. And he's got these little Pudmobiles, which kind of are like these basically chubby little penis cars. And they're all dreaming of various things. One of them is dreaming about sex. Actually, they're all dreaming about sex. And when he comes home in the morning, when one of the workers comes there the next day, he's like, motherfucking Pudmobiles, wet dreams. And there's oil everywhere because they splooged in the middle of the night. Okay, this is, that page was by Keith Clespies. Wow, never heard of that guy. Pretty nice cartooning, though. Almost reminds me of like the Dutch underground cartoonists from that time. I don't know, like Evert Gerets or however you say his name. But different. But here's that Crime Comics. And this is by Clifford Neal, who was probably really young at the time. He is also draws under the name of, how do you say this? Oisif Eguex. But he is probably most famous for, a few years after this, he started Dr. Wortham's Comics and Stories. A pretty interesting, fascinating proto-underground. It's almost like a fanzine, but it's pretty slick and accomplished. So I guess it's an underground, but, you know, it's not published by any of the underground companies. And we get a little crime story here. This guy breaks out of jail. His girlfriend's waiting to pick him up in a car. This is some pretty raw Clifford Neal artwork. I have the first issue of Dr. Wortham's, and I think it's maybe... God, I have no idea, actually. I think it's late 70s, early 80s. His art is pretty tight at that point. But we definitely see some fanzine-type art here. You know, you can tell he's got skills. He's got chops, but it's still pretty rough. So the convict and his girlfriend escape. They're in this hotel room. Looks like they're going to have some fun. And I'm sorry, it looks like they're going to have fun, but apparently she's going to off him. She's picking up a gun, and it says just as she reaches for the .45 to finish him off, the federals, I don't know, FBI guys break in, and they shoot her dead. And then the convict shoots the two cops. And the story ends with his girlfriend bleeding out, and he's like, lousy cops. Very strange. Okay, guys, if the Robert Williams cover wasn't enough, this next thing is so worth the price of admission. So it has a little backstory. In November of 1971, the San Francisco bus company or whatever, the bus transit, they used to have ads in buses. I don't know how old you people are. Actually, I do know from YouTube. You're all my age, roughly, maybe in your 40s. But, that's kind of a thing of the past. When you used to ride the bus or the subway, there was all these ads when you looked up, like 2 foot long, 8 inches high. And it kind of actually, before the internet, before having a smartphone, it kind of made the time pass. You could look at some ad and be like, oh, that looks interesting. So I guess in November 71, the hip radio station in San Francisco, KSAN, they hired Victor Moscoso to do this wraparound ad that would go across the whole subway. They basically bought all the ad space in one subway car. Usually it was like 30 ads. They bought them all and got Victor Moscoso to do this giant strip. So basically it was only seen for a month if you happen to be lucky enough to ride the San Francisco buses. So they've got it and they reprinted it. And guys, if you're a fan of Victor Moscoso, this is some of the best shit he ever did. So I got to make sure this is all in frame. So here is KSAN presents the comics. And look at this just beautiful, surreal Victor Moscoso artwork. I'm a huge fan of him from all the zaps and everything, whatever. I gotta say, this is some of his best work. This is so tight and just, untight too. It's really loopy and, drenched with acid. Not really a plot. I mean, there's definitely some sequentiality. There's a character. We see that dinosaur character he loves to draw. And this rabbit character. Let me make sure. Okay, got that one. Then it continues. So all these strips on a bus, normally this would be one ad. And so this is like all the ads they bought on the bus. Can you imagine riding the bus and being bored? You're heading to work and just getting a walk around the subway car It's almost like the subway car was transformed into a museum for a month. I love these anthropomorphic cars here. And these weird fairies. These angular fairies getting them. I don't know. I'm trying to explain this strip. It's pretty inexplicable, but it's amazing. Okay, I got that one. And then the bottom flap here. I want to make sure you can see the whole thing because it's amazing. And then I love this, how this kind of linear strip, you know, it's all like a film strip. All of a sudden it just goes in outer space. And you can't see the dividing as much because it's all black, but it's still doing the strip thing. This is like the end of 2001. It's amazing shit. Oh, God. I don't know if this has ever been reprinted again. It's amazing, though. So right there. If you see this on the internet for like $50, consider it. It's kind of worth it. Williams cover, that. This amazing Arkham, historically important Arkham interview, which I don't think will ever be reprinted. So we have this guy, Bob Inwood, and the name sounds familiar, but I can't remember where I've seen him. Maybe he did some undergrounds. It looks like his style is very undergroundy. And takes place in Russia. And these guys are hanging out, these two guys drinking vodka, and this woman shows up. And she tells them her tale, a werewolf story. Man, let's look at this. Pretty damn nice. Really reminds me of God, I'm having a mental block. Psychotic Adventures guy, Charles Dallas. But it reminds me of a bunch of other guys too. But definitely the really deep, rich inking in this is I see some later Charles Dallas. So basically she falls in love with this guy. Her whole family hates him. He's kind of creepy. I mean, he's the guy your mom warned you about, basically. So she thinks he's really hot. And everyone else is like, he's bad news. So she goes off to live with him. And she's got her 2 kids. And he's going to marry her and be the stepfather. I'm really glad this art is on 8.5 by 11 size pages. Because I'd like it bigger even. It's so dense and beautifully illustrated. So basically her dogs are very afraid of this guy. I'm sure you know where this is heading. I mean, the title's called A Werewolf Story, right? And the kids are kind of creeped out by him. And one night she wakes up and the daughter says, "A wild animal killed one of our dogs." And then the other dog is killed. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by this art. This is insane amount of illustration here. It's a little raw, but not much. It's like pretty great. But you can tell, like, you know, I can imagine what he'd be drawing like in a few years from this. And then she sees, she wakes up from a slumber one night, goes in this room and sees her husband and this woman, actually and another guy. I guess they're like a werewolf club. And she sees him turn into a werewolf, transform. And they run up to the children's room. Of course, she frantically runs after them. And by the time she makes it to the bedroom, the children are screaming. Actually, the sound effects is crunch. It doesn't sound good. And of course, when she looks in the room, the werewolves are chowing down on her children. Pretty horrifying. She screams in anguish. And then it looks like she just passes out. Somehow she escaped to tell this tale to these 2 vodka drinking guys. And then it says to be concluded next issue, which there never was one. So I'm curious, if anyone knows, that would be great if you could leave a comment. I'm too lazy to look it up. I'm not a good internet researcher. And I wonder if this was ever completed and or collected. I hope so. It's pretty damn good. Here we have a one-pager from Trina Robbins. And it's pretty terrible all around. The art's pretty bad. It's basically almost like a mini, shock horror story. Here we have Travels with Myron by Bob Foster. And, we just looked at this in comics book number, 4 or 5, maybe 3, just like a month ago or 2. So I'm not going to recite the whole thing. But I do like his kind of classic, cute cartooning. It looks like he could draw a Sunday strip. It's just, it's nothing revolutionary, but he's got a nice little cute, fun style. And basically this guy gets on a moose, and he's trying to discover America. Mr. Natural shows up. And, of course, hijinks ensue. So here we have Al Dvorin doing a Mobius strip. Apparently, you could actually cut this out and tape it together and twist it and make a Mobius strip. Let me double check on that. I might be wrong about Al Dvorin. Nope, it's Keith Cleespies again. And now I want to read more, even more than the other story. I want to find more of this Keith Cleespies character because this is some nice, interesting art. Very lethargic, very druggy. It's very much like that Moscoso strip, actually. It's just almost like a film strip, just flowing with psychedelic imagery. But then Little Nemo shows up, a beautifully drawn Little Nemo. It's very Winsor McKay-ish. Yeah, the paper's just really nice and thick. This was obviously made with love. The prozines of that time, they really were these beautifully produced publications. This is no exception. That's some great stuff. Everything's all warping and yeah, I never heard of this guy anywhere. Keith Cleespies, double E. And that's the end of the Underground Comics section, even though there's more comics at the end after the Crumb interview. So the Crumb interview continues. A lot of great choice art, Think about it. Back then, these kind of alternative newspapers were disposable. People weren't collecting these thinking, oh, it's our Crumb. This is going to be worth a lot someday. It was a bunch of hippies who were, spilling bong water all over it or just throwing it out, So this is really valuable at the time. This is one of his greeting cards. God, I want to see a whole book of these. This is amazing art. And it's actually kind of funny. Yeah, I guess he did a whole line of greeting cards that were kind of, naughty, transgressive. Because it was, the 60s. I made a special trip downtown to get you the birthday card at exactly 8:30 Monday morning. That's when they changed the clothes on the mannequins. This little perv. It's kind of funny. But look at this beautiful Crumb cartooning. This is old school Crumb cartooning. This is way before he did Undergrounds. At least I think so. I'm pretty sure it is. He mentions that he actually did do a few greeting cards for money after he had already done Zap at some point. Now, guys, I should have done research. I'm sorry. But I assume this is from Help Magazine. I can't imagine where else it would be. The small businessmen. Movie money was hard to come by in the Depression. Here's how enterprising young businessmen met the problem in Washington Heights. And it's just a reminisce by this guy. Arkham just illustrates it. He's just reminiscing about being a kid in the Depression and how these kids would make their weekly nickel so they could go see the latest serial because they were very addictive. There'd be 15 chapters. They'd always have a cliffhanger. And, God, look at this amazing Crumb art. So different than, what he's famous for. But Crumb could do anything he wanted. I'm sure if, Dell Comics called him up and said, hey, we want you to draw Uncle Scrooge, he would have done an amazing job. And it's just really interesting anecdotes about growing up in the Depression, all the various things they did to make money. But it was all about going to the movies. They were all addicts. So right there, I don't have that reprinted anywhere. I have every complete Crumb book from Fantagraphics. I don't think that's in there. It probably is. I just have a shit memory. But I don't think it is. This must have been super rare at the time. Maybe it is now. Just a flyer for one of his gallery shows. So, this was just a poster, a flyer for a month. And you'd never see it if you didn't live in that city, in San Francisco. And it's just amazing, beautiful art Crumb drawing. And that's the end of the Crumb interview right here. Once again, I got to check. This one is David Carbonic. That is so of its time. This kind of pointillism has to be the early 70s. This is really interesting. It's this guy, Bob Zoll. Very Leslie Carbaja-ish. But in almost a weird way, it's almost like a precursor to Al Columbia, where the shading is really interesting. Like, it almost looks like, hey, is this some cell from an old Max Fleischer cartoon that was banned by the Catholic Decency Squad or something? I don't know. It just looks very interesting, the gray tone, or very light gray tone here. And it's these little imps, and they're all running around this kitchen getting into all these antics. But something about this is just, it almost looks like it's cell animation. Like the background is, more lush because it's gray toned. But then there's primary characters who are doing the action, just like in an animated cartoon. They're not as detailed because they have to move. Very strange. Sorry, once again, I'm going to check the title of that. It's called Kitchen Safety. And here we have a nice little drawing by Al Dvorin. That's pretty amazing, actually. That's some great, almost abstract art. Pretty fun. This is just a little editorial from the editors of Promethean. I guess they were selling Promethean book plates. R. Crumb, Robert Williams. I wonder if any of these exist. And I'm pretty sure this is Al Dvorin as well. Oh, so this originally went for $2. I mean, it was the early 70s. $2 was a lot of money, but this is just a beautiful publication. Oh, God, just to top it off, as if everything wasn't great enough, this beautiful painting by Alex Nino. Oh, these colors are crazy. Kind of muted, but just fucking gorgeous. Man, I'm a huge Alex Nino fan. That guy can do no wrong on my book, even when he has, though. He hacks it out sometimes for those, I don't know if you guys used to get those black and white Classics Illustrated type knockoffs. They were popular when I was in school in the late 70s, early 80s. And it's just Alex Nino with no hint of his style. Just drawing kind of like a typical Filipino artist. It could be Jess Jodelman with less detail, or Alfredo Alcala with less detail. You'd never guess it was Alex Nino. But this is, prime Nino. It's amazing. There you have it, guys. Promethean number 5. I guess, underground prozine, whatever you want to call it. I put it in the underground comics section in our special sections here at the Hercules Academy, and that's where it will remain. And pretty much it's an underground, and with a really nice interview with Art Crumb. So hope you guys enjoyed looking at this, and I'm really kind of curious what you guys think of this. It's like, I'm curious if you've even heard of it. I mean, if I didn't happen to see it in Bud Plant when I was 13 or 14 and order it, I probably never would have seen this. I don't know. I lucked out there. But I hope you enjoyed looking at this, and I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.